You're listening to the Arcbenders Podcast, a show created to challenge you to be bold enough to live an extraordinary life with impact. I'm here with Elisa Hurt.
And that's Christina Noel. Now sit back, find your happy place, and get inspired.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to episode 3 of the Arcbenders Podcast. Thank you so much for joining us. So to kick things started, first off, if you haven't listened to episodes 1 and 2, please do. Go back. They're both incredible. But if this is your 3rd episode with us, we are so happy you're back and continuing along this journey with us.
I was about to say, there's no way we're on our 3rd episode. When you said, welcome to episode 3, I was like, no, that's wrong. It's episode 2. I can't believe that we're on our 3rd episode. That's really exciting.
It is really exciting. Also, it might just be because creating a podcast puts you in like a completely different time and space reality.
I know, seriously. I can't believe how much time we've spent on this, but it's so rewarding that it's actually out there in the world now, and it's not just this imaginary, hey, one day we'll have a podcast.
I know, it's real.
Yay.
So thank you so much to everyone who's taken the time to leave us a rating or review. We wanted to give a special shout out to Danny Rosen, who left a fabulously thoughtful review. And one of the highlights was that he described our show as having the warmth of a golden retriever, coupled with the go out and make good things happen of a Scottish soccer hooligan.
What does that even mean? I
don't know. Danny, you're going to have to let us know.
Yeah, and also I love the intrigue that it creates. It's like, if you don't know what that is, then you're just going to have to listen to the show to figure it out.
Exactly.
Do Scottish soccer hooligans make good things happen, or do they just go out and drink a lot?
I feel like in Arcbenders IRL, that's our Facebook group, we're going to have to ask the community.
Oh my gosh, yes, absolutely. Well, I have a beer right now, so... Oh, hey, I have a beer in a brand fuel koozie, so... Look at me.
Look at that.
Thanks, Danny.
Elisa, that's awesome. You have a Brand Fuel koozie on. How appropriate. So Danny co-founded both Brand Fuel, which is an amazing promotional products agency, and Band Together. And he's just a pillar in our community. Every year, Band Together raises over $1 million for a local nonprofit. And that's just, outside of work. Danny is one of our featured Arcbenders, so I highly recommend you check out his article. We'll be sure to include it in the show notes.
Who's our guest today, Christina?
Our guest is the amazing Caitlin Kawaguchi. This interview that we have for you today was taken on my Arcbenders road trip last year. And it was during my New York City stop that I met up with Caitlin at the assemblage. And I was absolutely fascinated to meet her because when I was doing some research for our interview, I noticed on her LinkedIn profile that she had what looked like 3 jobs listed. It turns out through our conversation, we discovered it was 2. And for me, that was a really big wake-up moment. I was just blown away by this idea that someone could actually find 2 very unique organizations to work with. And really, in many ways, you'll hear that Caitlin's followed a very untraditional path, and yet it's been really great for her growth and her development and her career.
Well, for me, the thing that really sticks out about this interview is that message that you don't have to accept unlivable working conditions or decide or follow somebody else's path to actually have a career in impact. I think that a lot of people have that idea of well, if I'm going to work in impact, then I'm going to have to sacrifice a lot for myself. But you can actually design your own professional life in a way that is unique and works for you, and then still have a massive positive impact on the world in your own way.
In many ways, this interview was a game changer for me. So at that time, I had been working for myself for about 6 months, and I was really starting to struggle right before the road trip. And the road trip was this huge breath of fresh air and an amazing source of inspiration and really the heart of this project. And I also was getting to a place where I was panicking that I really wanted more freelance work. And I knew I needed a different direction to go other than just working on Arcbenders full time. And so when I met Caitlin, she really blew my mind. And actually in telling her story to multiple friends, she's actually surprised and and inspired other people that I know already, which is why I'm really excited for you to hear this interview. So when I got back, I actually started working more closely with Elisa's company, Unity Digital Agency, and I also worked with another early stage B Corp called Protopia. And in doing that work with the two companies, I realized that my happy place was definitely working with multiple organizations. And up until that point, I never even thought about that as an option. Actually, I honed in even further and realized that I really wanted to do consulting, that my happy place is having a handful of projects and a handful of organizations that I'm working with to help really scale and grow and coach them to success.
Yeah, and I think one of the super happy things that you bring to Unity is this idea that leaving an organization isn't a bad thing. And you remind my team pretty constantly that your best success is like basically firing yourself from Unity.
Yes, I am not your traditional consultant. Because for me, my goal is to come in to an early stage company or even nonprofit and work with them in a phase where they have this great foundation, but they know they want to grow. And then really working with them on their marketing and strategy to hone their processes and to focus on really what's going to most help them grow, whether that be changing their communication strategy or, in Unity's case, honing the business development process.
And operations. I mean, you've helped us a lot with operations. I don't think that I would have taken the leap into EOS without your support and encouragement.
Oh, that's right. Oh, my goodness. So there's an amazing interview with Gerard Staten. And he's the executive director of the Helios Foundation. And he talks about how he manages his board using the Entrepreneurial Operating System.
That interview is on the ArcBenders website.
Oh, yeah. And I also have a mentor named Maria Kingery who has used this thing called Entrepreneurial Operating System. And it literally turned her B Corporation, Southern Energy Management around. So by implementing this system in her company, they went from not profitable to thriving in like 1 to 2 years. It was unbelievable. And now she's actually a coach. And so thanks to my connection with Maria, I help get Unity connected to that system. That actually comes up in Caitlin's interview is I asked, what has she seen as a success for scaling a social impact organization? And that having a mission seems like that should be enough. But it's kind of like with relationships, like love is not enough.
Yeah.
There has to be structure.
Yeah, exactly. I think that with EOS, what I like about it too, not to be like a commercial for it or anything, but it's this idea that like your company cannot be sustainable without like the right people in the right seats and the system, the hiring, and the culture. And, like making sure that all of those things work together is how a company can scale. And social impact organizations, I think we get so caught up on our why that, and then our what, that like, it kind of just, we burn ourselves into the ground a little bit, thinking that the mission is what's going to carry us forward and forget that like, you actually have to, you're running a business and you can't have positive impact if you like burn your business out and fail. So your company has to succeed and has to thrive in order for it to make any kind of impact.
And I love it so much because if you have the right people in the right seats and they're doing the work that they love doing, they're so much less likely to get burned out. And also, the whole goal of this is to create an organization that's sustainable. So people aren't getting burned out. They understand their role and they're actually empowered to make decisions. And I think that's fascinating. Like I am so fascinated by how can we better run social impact organizations because I want more people to have lives where they have purpose and I want them to get paid well to do that. And to do that, you have to have resources. Mm-hmm. Like you have to have more donations or you have to have more revenue. And that's why, as in my consulting work, if I can get an organization that I work with to a place that they don't need me anymore, then I've succeeded because now they're thriving and they can do it on their own and they've taken what systems and structures and work that I've done and made it their own.
Well, over the last 6 months maybe that you've been helping Unity, we have come so far. I can barely keep up with how quickly things are moving now at Unity, and it's just thrilling. So thank you.
Well, and thank you for taking a chance on me. I mean, in many ways, you'll hear this in the conversation with Caitlin that I was in a big transition in my life, and to be able to have the chance to work with a company like the one you've built, Lisa, and the team that you've built has just been, like, honestly, like one of the highlights of my life.
Aww.
Like, it has helped me find my purpose, and I'm just excited to have, and what's so neat is also our collaboration. Like, you've made me so much better. You've made Arcbender so much better. And I know that I feel like I've been able to do the same for you. And that's pretty magical.
Well, on a personal note, last Friday, I was driving. It was after a meeting. And so Johnny and I were riding in the car back together to the office. And we were talking about friendships and how important equity and like shared values, not shared values, but like just that give and take in relationships and how important it is in friendships.
And that actually relates to something that comes up, is that being surrounded by good people who are living creative and happy lives that really truly fulfill them. I think it matters. I mean, it really matters. And that also goes back to hiring. You know, who you work with matters, and the people you surround yourself with. I truly believe you are a combination of the 5 people you spend most of your time with.
You're a Mitch Albom fan, aren't you?
Oh my gosh, yes. Tuesdays with Maury.
Have you read The 5 People You Meet in Heaven?
I have, but I don't remember it.
Oh, that's the one that stood out to me. It was so good. It's like about the 5 people that like you would never expect kind of like have changed your life or like turned you in a certain direction in your life. And it was I loved it. It was so good.
Oh, see, Tuesdays with Maury is one of my favorite books. One other thing that I really appreciate is Caitlin gives some amazing advice about transition. Obviously, at the time of this interview, I was in one, so I really particularly appreciated it. But also, essentially what the advice is that it's okay to switch paths, and it is totally okay to be in transition. And that has turned into a big theme in all of these Arcbender interviews, which is really, what does success look like for you? And if you're someone who really is passionate about changing the world, but you find yourself in a situation where you're not working in social impact, or you're not in the ideal job, or you're not where you want to be, I love that her advice is that's okay, because I feel the same way. Like, Elisa and I, here we are, like, living the dream, working in social impact work. And yet I still fully give myself space that there's always this chance I might have to go back and get a job. If that's what my family needs, like, then that's what I'll do. And if you find yourself like having a need because you have debt and you need to get a higher paying job, or you're just burned out from working in a nonprofit, it is okay to take care of yourself and to go a different path for a while, and know that it's all about the long game, and it's all about finding purpose in a way that matters to you. You have to note that the interview, you can definitely hear some background noise because it is New York City.
I think it's so charming. I love it. There's sirens in the background. It really makes it feel like the city. It's great. For a more formal introduction, Caitlin Kawaguchi is a social impact and communications strategist who is passionate about building partnerships across sectors and cultures, and believes in an integrated approach to social change. Her work spans 3 continents and includes projects with grassroots organizations, international NGOs, social enterprises, and corporations. As you'll learn in Christina's interview with Caitlin, she is an inspiration to those who don't want to be put in a box and is a successful professional with 2 jobs. She is currently the Director of Marketing and Partnerships at Bird & Stone, a social enterprise jewelry company, and a digital engagement strategist for Spark Action, a youth and children's advocacy organization.
Thank you so much for joining me.
Thank you for having me. Excited to be here.
So just to kick things off, I really like to start with what inspired you and what kind of path have you taken to get to where you're at today?
When I was in middle school, Heifer International, they're a nonprofit, and they had an experience where you go in and you learn about how people around the world live on different dollar amounts each day. So for instance, if you were assigned to a certain part of the experience, you might have to walk a really long ways to get water. So you have to walk longer than everyone else. And you also have less resources. Maybe you don't have a bucket to carry the water. So you have to trade what you have to get the bucket, to carry the water, to walk the long ways. And I was in 6th grade at the time, growing up in the suburb in California, kind of seeing that was a real turning point for me. And I was really angry, and I couldn't believe that we let people in the world live this way. So after that, I started looking for ways to get involved with different social justice and human rights issues. And I actually got involved then through Students Against Mass Atrocities, which was called STAND at the time. And they were doing a lot of work around mass atrocity prevention and work in Darfur. Through one of their conferences was where I started to learn more about the policy side of impact work and learning, you can contact your representatives. And I was a student at the time in high school, and I wasn't considered technically a constituent yet, but I'd call and say, I'm going to vote when I'm 18, and I really care about these issues, and I want you to take action in this way. My college program was out of Long Island University called LIU Global. It was a 4-year program with 3.5 years spent abroad in a bunch of different countries. I knew I wanted to study human rights issues, and I knew I kind of wanted to do it looking at the world in a way that wasn't from a classroom in the United States. And that's something that kind of then took me on to move into the work I do today.
Where are you at now, and what are you working on?
So I lead marketing and partnerships for Bird & Stone. We're a socially conscious jewelry company. We raise funds and awareness for different causes and partner with organizations that are building more equal worlds, helping them amplify their work, and every product donates 10% back. And this, working in sort of this ethical fashion space, was something I'd been interested in also since high school. I did a fair trade fashion show for my silver award with Girl Scouts. And I'd always kind of had this hope to work in this area. And then in addition to that, I work with Spark Action, which is a children's and youth advocacy organization. I work on a couple of campaigns with them. I'm working on a campaign around juvenile justice, and then also with Opportunity Youth, which are youth 16-24, not in school and not working. So I help do some kind of social media strategy, communications with both of those.
So how did you find yourself in this situation? At what point did you decide you wanted to design your life? And then how did you slowly navigate to where you're now working in 2 different jobs? And how do you manage that?
From an early age, I had this idea of what I wanted to do and sort of this drive to learn how to really effectively make change. When I graduated from college, I started working with Peacework, which is an international education and development nonprofit, and it was a remote role. So kind of off the bat, I had a more unusual role than sort of the traditional 9-to-5. And I think once I did that, now I feel like it'd be very hard to go back and to do kind of the opposite. So I was surrounded by colleagues at Peacework who just were doing really cool things with their lives. In addition to leading some of the Peacework projects, they were living in other countries and traveling, and some of them had other small businesses of their own. So I was always really inspired by sort of that idea of having multiple pathways and multiple projects going on at the same time. And then I did Starting Block, which I know is how we connected. And I saw a lot of people doing exactly that, what I kind of admired in my colleagues at Peacework. And I was like, oh, this is really a possibility that people, can build these lives and create impact in a variety of ways, which is something that I always not necessarily struggled with, but I kind of was always wondering, as it felt very you either go into policy work or you go into social enterprises or you go into sort of nonprofit management, and it always kind of felt like there were these specific pathways, and I was like, I'm kind of interested in all of these things.
Yeah.
And how can I blend these together? And so really through talking to people and figuring out how they did it, and then really just connecting with people in New York, and I feel really lucky to be kind of in a space where geographically there's a lot of organizations who are open to kind of more flexible work arrangements and part-time arrangements. And so it definitely was a bit of time finding the right match of the work that I was doing, finding kind of a combination of things that I felt really interested in and excited by, and that I could do all at the same time and have them build on one another and not kind of take away from one another, which I think is what the combination of positions I have now, it feels like I'm always learning things at one or meeting people at one that are useful in the other as well. So that's become a really nice sort of cycle. And I had a mentor of mine also kind of mention as I was explaining when I moved in these positions, and I was telling her, and I was like, I'm really excited. I feel like it's a good fit. I'm thinking of the balance now, what the balance is like in the future. And she was like, it sounds like you've created this path that's different and is exciting and good for you and good for them. And that's really what, in terms of designing your life, you should be looking for too. Yeah.
As for the flexibility, so are you into going into the office? And how does that arrangement look?
So right now I go into the office usually twice a week with both my positions. I do like it. I like working with other people. Even when I was working remotely, I worked out of co-working spaces, so I would still be around other people. For me, I like working with people who know that I can do the work regardless of whether or not I'm in the office. I think that's something that I really value. And just knowing that everyone that I work with there, we all want to be working at sort of our being the best we can be. And that means, if you could sit in an office from 9 to 5 and not get any work done, but rather than have that, we'd rather have people work when they're, energetic and excited and want to do the work. And so, that looks like some sort of flexibility. And I also travel a bit with Spark Action. And so it's nice to have another position that supports that. And it means all my days look different. But I realized I like that. I know it can be tricky sometimes for some people, but I think identifying whether that's something that is useful or something that is more of a challenge is helpful in terms of thinking about what types of flexibility you're looking for. I started working multiple jobs when I transitioned out of piecework, and that was luckily a gradual transition. So I switched to part-time and kind of had this nice runway of I was part-time with them still, and I could look for other part-time work. And then as that became less regular part-time work, I could add more things in. So it was much more, it wasn't like an abrupt stop and then a start of, okay, I have to find work and I have to combine these things and I have to figure it out. So it was very, very gradual, which was good, and gave me some time to figure out what the right fit was. And originally I started doing project-based work thinking it would just be for 6 months, and thinking that I would, apply for full-time jobs and find something and move into that and, go back on that traditional path. And that was that. And that was a fun 6 months, But what I just kept finding is I was applying for different full-time jobs, and none of them were as exciting as what I felt like I had in this particular combination. None of them I felt like had the same growth opportunities and were as challenging. And it really felt like in a lot of cases I would be doing sort of the same thing day to day more than I would like to be. And so once I realized that, it's like, okay, I can commit to trying to do this. Maybe I can do this.
So one of the things I'm always fascinated to learn is, were there any obstacles in this transition that you eventually had to learn to deal with, and any advice that can come out of that?
Yeah, there are so many things I had to learn. It's been really helpful, I would say, having groups of people who've done similar things. So Starting Block, Dreamers and Doers, sort of these groups of entrepreneurial people who are like, oh yeah, I remember when I first started, and here's what I wish I had known. Because the biggest thing I think is you don't know what you don't know. So sure. Things it's the really, I don't want to say boring, but it is. It's kind of like making sure I had my taxes straight. I had all these people tell me, I was 3 years in, and then I realized, I hadn't paid quarterly taxes, and so I kind of was really grateful for people who just off the bat were like, here's the logistics of what you're trying to do. And I was like, oh, okay, cool. And I love working in operations and organizing, and so I've always been really into scheduling and management, and so that side of things actually was enjoyable for me. So I kind of got myself set up, got my systems in place, and then have been doing it, and now just plan to continue doing this. So yeah, it's been a really cool journey and a lot of learnings. And I think the other piece was if I ended up going full-time somewhere in the future, I also feel like I learned so much from this year, and I like knowing that I kind of know how to set myself up if I ever moved back into this style of work in the future, kind of that learning curve. I did it. I learned. And
it's brutal.
Yeah.
You're like, what am I doing?
Yeah.
I can't, y'all. I can't. So one of the things I'm also fascinated with is how can we scale social impact organizations? And I know you're an expert in that. And what works and like, what are your secrets? What for you have you seen as secrets to success for creating growth in the organizations you work with? Because to me, like, one of my missions is to help create more social impact jobs. Because there's so many more people who want to be doing this kind of work.
Yeah.
How can we succeed?
Yeah, really, it's kind of similar to what we're just talking about. But I think a lot of times what I've seen in sort of organizations or startups in the impact space is that the mission's really exciting, and the solution people feel like is right, it's right there, you can touch it, like we need to do this. But some of the more logistical pieces are sometimes missing. And so things like hiring people and who you're hiring and how you're doing your contracts and just the systems and structures you have set up, if those aren't there, I think you can have the best mission in the world, and you can even have a lot of funding because maybe you got a grant and you're excited. But if you don't have a long-term sort of plan for success and the right people on board, it can be really hard to get to that, to get beyond the first year or two of incredible impact, but then being able to scale. So I think sort of the organizations that I've worked with that have been really successful, and the organizations that I've seen have been orgs that off the bat have really focused on, okay, how are we hiring people? How are we setting up our systems? How are we building our culture? How are we creating, really creating a company, and not just sort of looking at the external impact, but looking at the company values and how that can exist as a small organization and then grow and then continue to grow that external impact.
That makes so much sense to me. And actually, I think you hit on a trend that I didn't even realize in some of my discussions, which is talent is really important. And if you don't have the right people or the right culture, or one thing I have talked a lot about is burnout, then it's going to be hard to be successful.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think burnout in nonprofits is far more common than should be acceptable. I think it's really frustrating to watch really talented people leave after a couple of years, and thinking about the costs for the organization of managing that transition, whereas if they just invested a little bit more in their people. And it also comes from funders, and funders need to recognize that overhead is a cost that needs to be paid, and in order to keep people, you need to support internal company culture and staff members and all of that. And I think I've seen more conversation happening around that in the last couple of years, but I still feel like too often I have conversations with other friends at nonprofits who are like, I can't do this for another 3 months. I can't go in on a Saturday for an event and not get paid for it. I can't do that. And that push, I think a lot of times nonprofits kind of say, oh, but it's for the mission, it's for the impact. And I think that's really hard, because everyone in the space obviously wants to contribute and have that impact, and so they do it. But if you continue to do that, and you'll burn out, you'll lose yourself, and then you can't make any impact. So it's yeah.
So to wrap things up, I have 2 questions around advice. So the first is, what is the best advice, and I mean, it can just be good advice you've received that you've found really helpful? And then the second is, like, what other advice do you personally have from your experience for people who want to make an impact?
Oh my gosh, there's so many things. I think one really good piece of advice has just been that transition is okay, and that you can work in the impact space, and if the organization isn't the right fit, or you get burned out from the work and you need to do something else for a little while, that's okay, and you can always go back to it. And I think there's a lot of pressure, similar to what we were kind of just saying, a lot of pressure in the nonprofit sector to really stay on a specific path of impact. And if you kind of do anything else, it's a bit looked down on, or it's like, oh, you're doing that now, really? There's kind of this conversation around it. But I think I've met a lot of people who've done these transitions and have worked in nonprofits and worked in the private sector and started a company and gone back to a nonprofit or sat on a board. And I think knowing that transition is okay. And there's so many ways for people to make impact. And it might not be the right fit for everyone to drop what they're doing and work at a nonprofit, right? But you can sit on a board, you can volunteer, you can donate, you can mentor someone in a nonprofit in leadership and management. There's so many ways to look at it, and I think it's really important in what I've been told is kind of to find that fit, that sweet spot that is good for you and good for who you're working for, and that's how you can really make a difference.
I love that.
Yeah.
I really do. Like, I love that. Well, and being someone who's going through a transition, it's just helpful to hear that advice because it is hard. It's so hard.
Yeah.
And burnout is very real.
Yep.
Well, thank you so much again for sharing your story with us.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
If you'd like to learn more about Caitlin, you can find her online at CaitlinKawaguchi.com. That is CaitlinKawaguchi.com. You can shop for beautiful giving back jewelry at burdenstone.com. And you can support collaborative journalism and advocacy for young people at sparkaction.org. And in case you didn't get any of those, we'll have these links in the show notes.
Right now, as a matter of fact, I am wearing this beautiful bracelet set from Bird and Stone that Christina gave me for Christmas. And there's this like really beautiful stamped bangle that says the future is female, and then a beaded bracelet that kind of goes with it. And the sweet thing about this is they give 10% to Planned Parenthood of New York City to support access to family planning and reproductive health services. Thank you, Bird and Stone. Thank you, Christina, for this beautiful, beautiful, and impactful gift.
Isn't it cute?
I love it.
I love that branding too, the Cleopatra branding. That was on point.
And if this episode changed anything about your perspective or life in any way, we are collecting listener questions and insight to share on future episodes. So you can leave us a voicemail at 984-464-0254, or you can record a voice memo on your phone and email it to us at hello@wearethearcbenders.com.
Also, if you want to hang out with us online, you can join us on Facebook. We have a group called Arcbenders IRL. That's IRL as in real life, which I had to explain to my mother, which I joked about last week. And she still hasn't listened to the episode, and I'm like slightly afraid she's going to call me out when she does. But in case you didn't know, now you're like, cool. And it's a great group. We share articles, we have conversations, and we'd love to get to know you more. And our next episode, we have an incredible guest. His name is Fagan Harris, and he's the CEO of Baltimore Core, an incredible organization that enlists talent to accelerate social innovation in Baltimore and advance a citywide agenda for equity and racial justice. You guys, Fagan is one of the most inspiring people I've ever met. His story will blow your mind. And also, we talk about burnout, and I love it. I appreciate it because we're having an important conversation that needs to be had. So don't forget to tune in.
And another big thanks to Caitlin Kawaguchi for being a fantastic guest. The music for today's show is from the one and only Ryan Levin.
Thanks so much for tuning in. And don't forget, every little thing you can do to make a difference matters.